Welcome to Villani Landscapers. We are happy to have you on our team of professionals. We at Villani are all dedicated to our mission of passionately teaching our team to serve our clients and our community. The purpose of this video is to familiarize you with the procedures for safely performing the primary duties of the maintenance department. The steps for working a property remain the same whether you're on a commercial or residential property. In this video, we'll follow along as our demonstration crew works a property from start to finish. Before the crew even starts their day, they perform a thorough check of truck and trailer. They're checking the tires, they're checking the lights, they're checking the hitch. This is a DOT inspection that is required by the state and must be performed every day. After they get done with the DOT inspection, most of our crews go ahead and check all of their machines for oil, for hydraulic fluid, for power steering fluid. They make sure that all their equipment is on site or in the trailer. They make sure they have everything they need for the day. Rob is here checking the oil on the machines and the truck, checking the air filter, making sure that it's clear for the day, checking all the fluids that they need to every day. One of the most important overlooked one is one Ray is doing here, which is the hydraulic fluid. Safety is of the utmost importance, and the first part of safety is your earplugs and your safety glasses, which must be worn on all jobs. Making sure you have a first aid kit that is fully stocked is very important, and here you can see Rob putting out safety cones to help prevent people from parking next to the vehicle and just knowing it's there. Also, if any safety functions are not followed, a supervisor might be on site and request that you do put in your earplugs or wear your safety glasses. One of the most important functions of starting a job is what we call the crew huddle. And this is an explanation from the foreman as to how he wants each employee to work. In other words, who's going to be mowing where, who's going to be line trimming where, who's going to be blowing where and when. Any additional issues that come up, if there's weeding issues, the foreman will address these at this point. It could come at a later time. But the best time to set up a job so that it runs as efficiently as possible is before you start the job. From the foreman's perspective, he's got to make sure the job runs smoothly. So in order to do that, these conversations need to be had, and each employee really needs to pay attention and follow his instruction. Next, we're going to talk about the use of different size lawnmowers. Here's a picture of a 21-inch mower, a 52-inch mower, and finally a 60-inch mower. These are typically what we use. On the 60-inch mower, the sit-down riding mower, it is important to note when doing your perimeter pass around the property to pay attention for things like garbage and debris that can get away the machine. In this circumstance, you have to get off the machine, pick it up, and get rid of it instead of running over it. You can see Rob is putting up his roll bar in this picture and his seat belt before he goes up any slope. This is something that Villani Landscapers requires for safety purposes. Now he's demonstrating how to go up and down a curb. And we do it in this manner so that we avoid any damage to the machine. And there he is going up the curb now. Moving on to the 52-inch mower, which is most likely a stand-up mower. Here is Jose going around a light pole and going around the perimeter pass. Here's an example of actually what not to do when making a turn. You can see on the lower part of your right-hand screen there's a turn mark there. We are trying to avoid that from happening, so make sure you do 2 or 3 turns in wet areas. Here, Antonio is cutting a turf panel at one of our larger high-end condo complexes. As he makes his first perimeter pass, notice how his left wheel is always staying on the grass. It doesn't ever actually go onto the asphalt and leave tire marks in the driveway itself. Now he's noticed some garbage and debris on the grass, and he got off his machine to pick it up. Notice that he turned off the machine so that when he did get off, he was able to do it safely, without the danger of spinning blades. The next thing to watch is when he's mowing around this tree ring, he's trying to avoid any damage by keeping the wheel of the mower on the grass. It never goes into the tree ring. If you put the wheel in the bed, you actually can ruin the bed edge. You'll notice that he's actually going pretty slow now. This is a high-end client, and they do not like to see people driving really fast on these turf panels. And many times, homeowners in these condo communities do come out and watch what's going on. Also, this turf panel is a little wet, so it's important to go slower so as to not ruin the grass. Antonio is noticing that this part of the turf panel is actually really wet, so he decides it is probably not a great idea to go over this area with his very heavy machine, as it will sink and create mud marks. Now he's got two options. He can either bring out a small mower, like a 21 or 30-inch mower, to finish it off, or if it's a small enough area, he can let it be for this cutting. This will be the foreman's decision of which method he'd like to see used, and then relay that decision to the rest of the crew. Every technician who is cutting should be aware of these wet parts. Here's a close-up of the area that Antonio skipped. What I'm noticing will be on the top middle part of the picture. There's a dark tire mark that shows where Antonio decided that it was too wet and it got a little muddy. Instead of continuing to cut, he stopped right there, noticed the tire mark, and decided to stop using this machine on this part. Since this area is fairly wide, I would envision him using a 21-inch or 30-inch mower to finish off the rest of it. But considering this turf panel is really wet, he made the right decision to stop cutting. Another thing that we like to focus on is using the right size mower and the right turf panel. And here, Ray is using a 21-inch mower in an island. Here's another vital part of the Villani Landscapers Maintenance Program, and that is proper line trimming. Our line trimmers, we require them to follow behind the lawnmowers and not get ahead of them. And the reason for that is, as you can see in this clip, the lawnmower is unable to get this 90-degree angle, and the line trimmer has to follow behind and clean it up. And if the line trimmer goes before the mower, you may not see that. Here is another typical thing that Villani likes to do, and this is line trimming, as we call it, straight up and down. And in order to do that, just tilt the line trimmer vertical rather than horizontal. It achieves a much nicer appearance. One thing you'll know is that line trimmer line goes away after a certain amount of time, and you have to redo and add line to your line trimmer. If you have any questions about how to do this, you'll have to talk to your foreman or any other seasoned employee that's part of Landshapers. They can help you figure out how to do it. But there is a very specific way of doing it and a direction that it has to be put in. So Rob is going to start line trimming this area that Antonio just finished cutting. He's going to start using the curb for a guide. You'll notice how the line trimmer blade is positioned straight up and down. We've talked before about how this creates a really nice, crisp, straight up and down square look. Some line trimming practices have the line trimmer angled so it looks like there's a taper on the cut of the grass. We feel this straight up and down look is cleaner and crisper. Often you'll have to go a little bit slower when doing this, but it achieves a much nicer look. As Rob trims the rest of this first panel, you'll notice a couple of things. First, he's not trimming where it's not necessary. He also hops over to each tree ring as he comes to it and trims only the area that needs to be trimmed. Maybe it's the whole thing, but in certain cases, there are only certain parts of the tree ring that need to be trimmed. When he's done with the tree ring, he'll go back to where he was in the perimeter and keep going. A lot of times people will just complete the whole perimeter, then go back and do all the tree rings or anything in the center. But if you're right there, you might as well go ahead and do that one spot and not have to come back. We also like to, on a regular basis, stick edge our properties, and this helps avoid constant line trimming. You're actually creating a space between the curb and the turf panel. When blowing, you'll notice that Rob is blowing all debris off of this hard surface. So not only is he blowing the grass that was blown up from the mower and the line trimmer, he's also, as a courtesy, blowing off the rest of that hard surface. You can see him blowing out some of the leaves and the tree ring as the finishing touch. This is one of the most important parts because how we leave the job is how the customer sees it done. So if we were to leave the property with those leaves in the drive and just blow off the grass, they're going to wonder why we're doing that. Why don't we just take care of the few leaves that were there as well? Rob does a good job of noticing that and clearing off all that hard surface. Checking the wind is another really important part of this job. Today it's not very windy, but when you blow, you have to think about how the wind is and whether it's working with you or against you, and blow in the direction of the wind. So sometimes you might be blowing in the complete opposite direction toward the truck. With the sun today, you can see all the debris going up in the air. That's why it's so critical to have on safety glasses, because just one tiny speck getting in your eye will cause a lot of pain. When working on larger properties, it is really important to consider the need to move the truck from spot to spot. This crew has parked the vehicle in one location, they've line trimmed, they've blown, they've mowed the grass, and now they're moving the truck to a closer spot to deal with the rest of the property. If they don't do this, it's a much less efficient way of running a larger property. Bed care is one of the most important functions we offer at Villani Landscapers to our clients. Weeds are always a concern, and here you can see one of our technicians pulling out a weed. It's important to note that we like to pull all large weeds and spray smaller weeds. Here Rob is taking a full concentrate of Roundup and mixing it to the proper dilution ratio with water. Adding more Roundup doesn't always make a lot of sense, so just use the applicator's spec for that. If you have any questions, talk to your foreman. Here is a pump sprayer, a hand pump sprayer. We also have backpack sprayers that are used for larger properties. It's important when you're doing spraying to not walk over what you've already sprayed. Oftentimes overlooked during bed care is getting weeds out of existing plant material. Rob is in some coreopsis areas, looking through the plant material, pulling out weeds. He's found a couple there. It's this kind of detail that really differentiates Landshapers from other companies. Especially in rose bush areas, oftentimes places don't want to do bed care in there because of the thorns, but finding those patches of grass like Rob just found and any other weeds is really important. It's that attention to detail that really differentiates us from other companies. Here's another area that's difficult. In annual beds, weeds grow all the time. We can't spray Roundup, we can't put down pre-emergent, so weeds just grow and we have to always pull them out. As part of the services that we provide at Landshapers, horticultural services is one of the more important things. The lily that Rob is working on right now had some foliage that was falling down and leaning over and just didn't look right. As you can see, this doesn't necessarily look like a beautiful plant material. So he's pulling out all the bottom growth, cutting back some of the dead stalks that are in there, and trying to make this lily look a little bit better than how it looks right now. And you can be aggressive with these plants. They grow back on a regular basis throughout the year. If I were Rob's supervisor, I'd probably come up to him and suggest that he be a little bit more aggressive with this and pull out some of the side material that's fallen over. One thing that looks really good is when plant material is separated from one another. And in this case, there's an annual bed, and then there's some perennials, and the perennials are growing into the annual bed. So to make it look nice and clean and manicured, Rob is cutting out the perennial, leaving the annual, and creating a little bit of space between. If you can see down on this, there's some geraniums on the close side of the shot that are still growing into the annual bed, and it doesn't look as good. The other area looks nice and clean and manicured, well maintained. For some of our high-end residential clients, we will check in on their irrigation systems. And in this sense, this is a Hunter control box. And for this time of year, I would envision that this client would not need to be running their irrigation system. So I just want to check and make sure that they're not running it. So I'll turn the dial to which days it's set to be watering, and oh my gosh, I see that it's watering every day, and it tells me that right here. As a trained technician, I will know that information in advance. So then I need to do a little bit more investigation and check to see which stations are running for every day of the week, which is way too much water. And I noticed that all the zones are actually set to 0 amount of time, except for one zone that happens to be the pond feature is running, which makes sense. So for this client, everything is set, but if it's not set properly, at least how I think it should be, I'll probably want to talk to the client or the client service rep to talk to the client and figure out the best watering schedule for their situation. And I'll make sure to set this back to run. Close the lid and on my way. Another function at Villani Landscapers is what we call pruning or trimming. Here, Ray is pruning out dead of junipers. The dead and junipers are very unsightly, and taking the extra time to remove that is a vital part of what we do here. Here's Olivia using a hedge trimmer, which we use to trim shrubs in a formal sense. She's being careful not to go too far into the shrub. She's taking off just the new growth, and that is an important part of this. We don't like to get down to the sticks, and a proper cleanup after is important. All right, Rob is getting ready to do some trim shape on a hedge. You can see he's putting on his safety glasses and his earplugs. So in this hedge that Rob is about to trim, you'll notice that there's a low spot on one side and another low spot on this side, and this center part is higher. So what the idea is to get this hedge to be as flat and level as possible. And so when Rob trims, he's not going to trim the entire shrub. He's just going to focus on this top part. And over time, we can get that down to a point where it's all level and we can trim the whole thing. But until the right side and the left side grow tall enough to match the center, and the center's brought down low enough, we'll just trim the top part. And that's what Rob is going to demonstrate right now. Flower annual care is another function we perform at Landscapers. It is important to note that when doing flower care, to not skimp on the amount of flower you're taking. Take out large chunks here and there. You can see that those are not just individual heads Olivia's taking out. She's taking out pretty large branches and pulling out some weeds at the same time. The reason to take out large branches is to help with new growth coming in and having more flower heads come out. It is important to note that watering annuals is of the utmost importance, and generally speaking, we will fertilize at least once a week for those clients that request it. But when watering, you must note that it is important to saturate these flowers. So when you water, as you can see is being done here, it's a slow watering motion covering a section at a time, and she's covering a 5-foot by 3-foot section, let's say, and then she'll move on to another 5-foot by 3-foot section. And what's important here is to actually go back to the previous 5-foot by 3-foot section and do that again, and repeat that process throughout the entire annual bed. As a foreman, one of your primary responsibilities is, once the job is complete, to walk through everything and make sure it is okay. You notice in that last clip there was some debris that was in the sidewalk that we'd send a crew back to go blow off. Here during the final walkthrough, I've noticed that there's a dead limb that's unsightly right at the entrance of this particular property. And what I'm doing is having Jose take his pole saw with a lopper on it and prune out this dead branch. It might seem like a minimal thing, but these are things that our clients like to see and that we expect out of our Villani Landscapers employees. As a final function on any job site, it is vital that all machines and equipment are cleaned off so they are presentable for the next customer. Here the crew is blowing off all grass and debris from the mower. They've taken the time to take the air filter off and blow that off to help ensure a machine that functions properly. As you can see in this clip, there's one direction to put this on, so please put it on that direction. When loading equipment onto the trailer, it is important to put it on in the right space. And here you can see one of the crew members is loading up a machine. Oops! He forgot to put the roll bar down. So he's going to get off the machine, put that roll bar down so he doesn't hit the trailer and damage the machine or the trailer itself. That's good attention to detail, another thing expected by every Villani employee. At the end of the job, the foreman is actually taking the time to talk about how the job ended up and what needed to be done in the future. This video is just the start of your on-the-job training at Villani Landscapers. We have covered safety, teamwork, attention to detail, and some specific tasks such as mowing, line trimming, pruning, and bed care. As you start to learn about the properties we service, your supervisors and team members will continue to reinforce all parts of the job that you've just been introduced to. you will become more familiar and comfortable with our safety practices and methods of working different properties. If you ever need more instruction, please do not hesitate to ask your teammates and supervisors. We will also check in with you several times during the first year to review your progress, and other reviews will continue in later years. Once again, welcome aboard, and we're glad to have you on the Landshapers team.